So the next system I want to discuss today will be the test delivery system, or TDS. Now in TDS, there are two interfaces that we'll discuss. The student interface, where they log in via the secure browser, log in their test and take their test, and also the test administrator interface. This is where the proctors approve, request to take the test, review student settings, monitor student progress. There are also two sites. There is the operational site. This is where you'll find your interim and summative assessments, and also the practice and training test site. I know the question will come up occasionally, how do I know I'm at the right site? And the answer to that is, with the practice and training test site, there should be tricycles both in the student interface and in the TA interface that will indicate you're on sort of the training test. This is what the sign-in page for the student interface looks like. You have the first name, SSID, which is your smarter ID, and the session ID. And we'll go over the session ID when we get to the TA interface, the test administrator interface. This is where you'll find it. Now they've logged in. They didn't have any programs running in the background. They typed everything in correctly. They've successfully gotten in. Here's the screen they see. And you can see that all 4 tests on this list are green. That means they're available to be taken. Now, our recommendation is that when we get to the T interface, I'll speak to this again, but you only actually proctor the test that you actually are wishing the students to take. In this case, the proctor has selected all of the tests to be proctoring, which may be appropriate in the case of you're doing your makeup session. Various people have been absent for various tests, and you can proctor all of them using the same test session. Here's a quick screenshot of what the student interface looks like. Now, we've been working on having the best user experience for all users, no matter disability. And what we've found is that by de-emphasizing the navigation and putting more emphasis on the content and the test items is the best for the students. So you'll see this is very similar to Firefox, Chrome, i.e. the browsers the students are familiar with, and that the next and the back buttons are up in the top left. You also have a button for pause, save your progress. We have in the top right things like your notes, your calculator. But other options are in this context menu, the thing with the 3 lines, maybe not very visible. This is where you flag an item for review so the student knows that they can go back and are reminded to review it again. Also, the item tutorial, so they would know how to take, so they would know if they need a refresher on how they answer the item. Now you can see that end test button there on the screenshot. What I did want you to know is that button will not be visible until they have answered every item on the test. So they can't, item 1, it's not there. Oh, wow, that's the easy button. No. They will need to take the entire test before that shows up. Yes?
So, I'm sorry. At some point, you may decide that the child can't continue the test. Can we, in the proper force that?
To end the test, like they just want to submit without continuing further?
Right.
If that test can't be continued, it would just expire.
Yeah, you would simply abandon the opportunity, the test opportunity. Yes?
Are the notes available if you do stop the test and resume it the next day? The students notes that they have a place to put global notes, right?
Yeah, I believe the notes should be there when you resume.
Okay, great.
So some of these tests have multiple segments. And it's at most 2 segments. And an example would be a higher grade math test, which would have a calculator section and a non-calculator section. Now these are similar to multi-section tests you may have taken, where you physically turn in part A, or the first part of the test, and then you would go and get part B. So when you reach the end of this segment, we want to give the students an extra chance to make sure they review the items and make sure that they know that they're in fact turning in this non-calculator segment and they won't, or the calculator segment, they won't be able to go back. So here's the review page you'll see. And I'll give them one more reminder to move on, and once they do, there's also reminders when they reach the end of the test entirely. And once again, we want to make sure, given that their nerves with the students, they don't just press one button and then the test is turned in. Oh well, that's hope you had good answers. So it'll say, okay, are you sure you want to end the test? And when they press yes, it takes them to the review screen. And you can see on this review screen, you have a drop down of all the items. You can go directly to them, and even shows which ones they've marked for review. So they can go directly to those items, make sure they've got the response they want, so they don't have to resolve those marks if they don't wish to. Now finally, at the end, they would press submit the test. Are you sure you want to submit? At that point, the test will have been turned in. Any more questions about the student interface? Okay, so here's the login screen for the test administrator. Yes?
Is the practice test the students say, does the same thing happen at the end where they are given the option of reviewing their answers and it's got a drop-down menu? And
Yes, this should be the same type of flow. Yes?
The interface looked a little different last year in terms of putting slides in. Will the practice tests have a new interface also?
Yes, that's a good question. We've gone to a certification authority about our interface, and that was, as I said, the feedback they gave us was that we were emphasizing too much navigation. And so that's to become WCAG 2.0 compliant. They've given us those suggestions where we made the buttons smaller, moved them to the top left. Those interfaces will be there on the practice and training test as well. Yes?
Is there a set number of questions for the test, and if not, is there some way for kids to know how far they're progressing? So when we think about pausing, is there only a couple left? Like how do they know? Because I know the practice test does like 16 or 16 or whatever. Is that the same for the regular field test or not?
So there is a big plan for performance task. For ELA, it's 4 items. For math, it's 6. For the CAT test, it is adaptive, so it's going to be roughly in the 30s for the math and maybe the 40s. But it may change 1 or 2, percent. So we don't say that there's a fixed number of items for each CAT.
And does it give a number, like you're on question 1, you're on question 2, will you see that question number as you go? So you'll have a sense the kids have only gotten 10 done in an hour?
Yeah, so when we talk about the TA interface, we'll also show how you can monitor progress and see where they are on the test. For that, to see how they're doing, but also if you have that student who's not taking it seriously, is answering 20 questions in 2 minutes, you'll be able to track that as well.
So going to the TA interface now, this is the same login as for your test information distribution and your TIE login. This is a single sign-in system, so all that same password and username will work for all the AR systems. Once you've gotten that in, here's what the test administrator interface, what the interface looks like. You can see in the top left, here's the check boxes for which test you wish to proctor. Once again, our suggestion is that you only click on those tests that you actually wish to proctor, so there's no chance that students will select the wrong test. Though you also have the option to select multiple tests, particularly in cases of a makeup session where you want to proctor more than 1 test. Once you've selected one or more tests, the Start Session button in the top left will turn green. Press it, and here's what you see. You can see in the top right, now you've been assigned a session ID. Our suggestion is to write this somewhere like the Blackboard, where students be able to see this and use that in conjunction with their test ticket to be able to log into the test. Now when they log in, they will not be able to actually proceed with testing until they are approved by the proctor. And you can see there's this approvals button in the top right corner. It will be green when there's 1 or more approvals awaiting. Click on that button and you'll have this screen. You have student A who's taking the grade 6 ELA performance task. You also have students B and C, they're trying to take the grade 6 ELA math performance task. And you're going to have the option, if you want, to approve them all in mass, using that Approve All Students button, or you can review certain student settings if you wish, and you can approve them individually, or perhaps even deny. Yes?
So I just want to clarify the question. If somebody is proctoring a test, they have to be trained as a TA?
So to proctor the test, yes, there would be TA, but we have a TA certification course. It is not required for New Hampshire.
So each proctor, has to be trained as a TA. They have to be able to get into the system, go in, select the test the students are going to be able to take.
Yes, anybody who's proctoring tests needs to be able to train, to be able to go through that process. They need to know how to do it. Yes?
You don't need to do that training, you probably will, but you don't need to make it do it right online, and then take the test online, and then you'll set without having it installed.
Yeah, New Hampshire is not requiring the TAs to physically finish that certification course. I think we'll get to it in a few slides. It's recommended. It's a good way to, because it's interactive. It shows how you would go through about approving a student. It's not required.
And I want to just add something regarding the proctor and the TA. If you're going to set up the site, you need a TA account. You need to be able to know how to navigate the site. But if you have proctors who are going to be in the testing environment, walking around, helping to look, make sure no one's cheating, and they're not actually going to be logged into the system, they don't need to actually have an account or actually know how to do it. If they're just walking around, helping with administration.
But there should be a TA in the room while the students are taking it.
Absolutely, because there needs to be someone to be able to set up the test session. And then after this, we're going to do that interactive demo where I'm going to be the TA and you guys are going to be the students to show how that whole process works.
Yes?
Can you talk about student needs and scribes has to be trained? Is there a specific module for training scribes?
And training scribes in terms of being able to enter the information into, for the student.
Yeah.
There is not a training module per se. There is one on accommodations where I believe they do talk about scribes. Smart Balance created it. It's also in their accessibility accommodations document that's also on the New Hampshire portal that talks about more about scribes and what training they would need. They would actually not need this actual administration training, but they may need to be familiar with the test to be able to, navigate and be able to respond the way the students would respond.
So when they refer to trained scribes, you understand that you live in will make sure that whoever's trying to be a scribe.
We'll know what to do exactly.
Any more questions? Yes?
The TA certification, do you know how long the actual training does take, just if we do one?
It takes about between 20 and 30 minutes. It's very brief. Yes?
So the student is not attached to a proctor until they're doing the session ID, correct?
That's correct.
So if last minute, if the certification needs to change, they're just given the session ID for
And the students are attached to schools. They are not attached to specific proctors. And the proctor could actually be different from one day to the next.
So if the student doesn't, so going back to a question earlier, if the student doesn't finish, needs to go to another location, they would have a new session ID if it's a different proctor?
That's correct. They would have a different session ID if they had a new proctor on a later session or even later that day.
You'll see that session IDs are generated in real time. So it's as active as I keep that session active for, then I close it out and I'll start it again the next day.
So so if you want to review student settings, some of these can be changed in the TA interface. So you click on the See and Edit Details button, and here's what the screen will look like. You can go and there's a drop-down menu where you can review, you can change those settings if you wish. Then you can set and approve them to test. Now, once you've approved your students for testing, you're able to monitor the student progress. This is on the bottom half of the TA interface screen. You can see they've just approved them, so you only see approved. You see the students that have been approved, their Smarter ID, and which test they're taking. Now, when we move a little farther on, you see some of them have started as 2 out of 4 on this training test. Others have started but haven't moved on. Now here we had the question earlier. So what happens if we have a fire drill? You want the students to get out of there. You don't want them having to find the pause button, making sure they've checked everything. Here we can just press the stop session button in this case, and that will end the test for all the students at once. You can also pause students individually. If a student becomes sick, you're not saying, no, you can't throw up yet, you gotta press the pause button. No, you can pause it from the TA interface. Also, that may be an option if you see a student not taking the test seriously or something, you go, hey, let's talk about this. That's your opportunity to, take action as the proctor.
Can I, on that screen right there?
Yes.
What do you mean print? What are you printing?
So that print button is, first there's an accommodation called print on demand. And so they would request that an item be printed to a printer. You as the proctor would have to approve this action. So I think we talked about it really briefly about the online TA certification course. It's not required for New Hampshire for the proctors to take this course before proctoring a test, but it is perhaps the single best way, one-stop source for basic training that is going to allow them to know what they need to do to be able to proctor a test. Yes?
Back to securing unprinted items. So if a student requests a question to be printed, then it must be...
So it's one that's set as an accommodation. So it's not every student can have the ability to request an item to be printed. So if it's set as an accommodation, they ask that the item be printed. You'll see that printer icon in the TA interface. They'll say yes, and they'll select it to the printer that they want the file to be printed to. Once it's printed, it's treated as a secure material. It will be destroyed afterwards. The TA needs to destroy it after testing is completed.
So it's not returned to you folks?
No, we do not. The only materials that will ever be returned is if you order a paper test.
So this will have, it's basically like in this certification course, it's like a certification course, it's like an interactive PowerPoint. It'll be like a slideshow, it'll run, it'll then have like interactive activities. Here, a student wishes to log into a test, how do you approve them, how do you start a session? There will be also, brief quiz questions that you can take to test your understanding. And when you get to the end, you can there'll be a certificate that you can print if you wish and hang it on the fridge. But it's not required that you take the course or print the certificate that's at the end.